webinar series, and we have been doing a digital and data-driven innovation series for quite some time. We had 62 webinars in that series. And since our global practice is now agriculture and food, because we consider food is integral to what we do in agriculture, and food is essentially a very important part of our food system right now. So we are now systematically looking at food tech innovations and other kinds of innovations in this series. And in this series, we are inviting innovators, thought leaders, policymakers, and uh, entrepreneurs and people who are coming with very out-of-box ideas about transforming agriculture and food systems using technologies, new business models, and new kinds of product and other kinds of innovations. And today we are going to discuss this topic from different perspectives. And we are very fortunate to have a very distinguished panel with us. Uh, we have Tom Reardon, who hopefully will join us soon, who has done a lot of seminal research on food entrepreneurship across many continents and has very interesting kind of thoughts and process about this whole food innovations and businesses which are sprouting globally all over the place, sometimes with very little support from the state or centralized kind of institutions. We also are going to discuss how do we create an innovation ecosystem and create new kinds of business models around food technologies and new products and services. And we're going to focus today on proteins, including alternative or plant-based proteins, and what would be the role of new types of SMEs in terms of quality, traceability, and sustainability. So I'm just checking once again, and all these proceedings are available on Open Learning Campus, where about 4,000 to 5,000 people visit it regularly. Even after the webinar is over, people go and watch recordings and presentations. And there is still an active dialogue going on the Open Learning Campus on this series. So all the proceedings of today's webinar and all the other webinars is available on this link, which Elvin also will put it in the chat for you to have a look at. So, Chichi, do we have Tom here or?
I see a Tom, but I'm not sure if it's Tom Redon. So Kim can go.
It's me. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
Tom,
you for joining.
Yeah. We were getting worried.
Okay.
So I'm glad that you are here.
I'm
Welcome.
very sorry. I'm trying to figure out how to turn on the video. It says stop video, so it seems like the video is working, but I don't see why it's not showing my video. But maybe it doesn't matter because I'll just share my screen with my picture.
As long as we can see your slides, it will be great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So the way we are going today is that we have three panelists, and I'll introduce them as they will come. You must have seen their bio. They all have very distinguished kind of thoughts and have done a lot of innovations already. And Tom is a thought leader in this area, and we are very lucky to have him here. We would request you to put your questions in the chat. Tom, we can see you. That's great. That's great. Yeah. It's good to see you after a long time. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. Great to see you. Sorry to be late here. Yeah.
So please put your questions in the chat for each presenter as they are presenting or after the presentation is over. And we will harvest the questions and answers at the end, cluster them, and to have one more response from all the panelists there. We also have a discussant, Yvonne Pinto, who will also raise some issues as a discussant as well. So we will start the process now, and we'll go ahead now and start with Tom, Professor Tom Reardon. A lot of people from the bank are familiar with Tom, and he's essentially a big thought leader who a lot of people in the bank look up to on what he's working on. He's a distinguished professor at Michigan State University. He's fellow of Agriculture and Applied Economics Association, and has been at MSU since 1992, and is also brought in the institutional kind of focus on this issue in a very significant way. He has been an IPPI Research Fellow, Rockefeller Foundation postdoc, and has studied the transformation of food value chains for past 25 years. Since mid 2000s, his focus is on the midstream of supply chains, including how the SMEs are dynamically developing along with large firms in wholesale, logistics, processing, and agriculture service. He has worked since 1981 on Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and he is really well known in this field, and is in Who is Who of economics, front page of New York Times, has participated in World Economic Forum, and is the most frequently quoted egg and food economist globally. Tom, over to you, and you have 15 minutes to present your ideas and thoughts on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you for the kind introduction. And I'm sorry that I'm technologically challenged after all this time. So WebEx is, usually I'm on Zoom, so I'm feeling the way with WebEx. Today, in my short presentation, I'd like to focus on the dynamic innovating small and medium enterprises in the value chain midstream in Africa and Asia. So 15 minutes, that's a big topic for this, but the midstream.
It's not sufficient for him.
Processing. Hello?
Can you please mute your mic, whoever is in? Thank you.
Okay, so I'll be focusing on the dynamism of these small and medium enterprises, SMEs, and looking at some implications of that. Let's see if I can now change slides. Let's see if this works. Okay, great. So I'll start with the pull factors that are driving a lot of the change in the supply chains and in the midstream, for example, of the small and medium enterprises are participating in. And the first thing that I'd like to emphasize is that there's been a huge change in the downstream market that they're focusing on in the past 25 years. Very rapid urbanization to the point where the urban share of the national food consumption now averages about 65%. In some countries like Nigeria, it's more than that. And so the urban market has become very powerful rather than just a marginal player and an interesting fact. Secondly, even though a lot of discussions focus on imports, really the import share, for example, in Africa, is only 10% of total food consumption. In India, for example, it's only 3%. So the imports are there, but they're not feeding the countries. They're a small part of it. Third, with urbanization and the reliance on the domestic markets, there's been an extremely rapid growth of rural-urban food value chains in the past 25 years. With Africa, for example, growing 800%, South Asia growing 800%, Southeast Asia growing 1,000% in the volumes going through these value chains. So already you get a feeling of fantastic success, a business that grew by 800 to 1,000% in a couple decades, moving gigantic amounts of food to cities that dominate with 65, 70% of the total consumption of the country. And of course, to feed bigger and bigger cities, more and more cities, these value chains have lengthened, which means that there's been a multiplication of the midstream, assuring the link between the farms and the city. And very interesting also because people often think that farmers just grow food, but in fact, you can see that purchases of rural consumption form 60% of rural consumption. So there's already a very large supply chain business that's going to rural areas to feed them between rural areas, between rural and urban areas. And finally, purchases and national food consumption form about 85% of all consumption. Only 15% in those two regions is coming from subsistence farming, where people are feeding only themselves. It's a very different situation from before. Secondly, within this big pie that's increasing, the consumption composition is changing very quickly. There's a very rapid rise of purchased processed food that's now very important in Africa and Asia, in urban and rural areas, and even among the poor as well as the middle class. So these changes are not just in the urban middle class. And also there's a rapid rise of non-staple grains consumption, fruits, vegetables, meat, fish, milk, oils. Even though there's a lot of discussion of affordability problems, we found that the consumption of these products has penetrated the consumption of the poor very quickly. So these demand side changes have led to a massive growth in midstream activity, wholesale, logistics, and processing, which form about 60% of the total value of consumption. Now, in that midstream, in Africa and Asia, small and medium enterprises, SMEs, by far dominate. Okay, they're approximately 80% of the midstream in Africa and South Asia. And in the past decade, 2 decades, there's been a quiet revolution in this segment. There's been a proliferation of tens of millions of SMEs in processing, wholesale, and third-party logistics, transport, warehouse, and cold storage. And if you look at the pie of midstream, you find that about not only 80% is of the purchase pie is handled by SMEs. If you look at the overall pie, the SMEs form 68% of all food that's handled in supply chains and consumed in Africa and Asia. So it's extremely important. Yet, I've found over and over in many countries that the midstream SMEs are neglected. Very often they're called the missing middle. And there's a lot of initiatives to try to get them going, create the midstream. But really, we found in our extensive research that it's not missing, it's massive, and it's growing very fast. Thus, we're calling it the hidden middle, because it's hidden from the debate, but it's really present in reality. And the other side, and I know these seminars are about thinking about new innovations, but the emphasis of my talk is that the midstream SMEs are already extremely innovative, especially in what I call first round innovations. And I'm going to have as an implication that we should focus primarily and foremost on helping them in these innovations that they're already doing. And to justify that point, I'm going to first quickly define innovations and show SMEs are already dynamically innovating by that definition. So innovation is a very broad idea. Innovation could be producing a new product or a trait with an existing technology, or innovation could be producing an existing product with a new technology, organization, or suppliers. Or innovation could be producing an existing product in a new place. And this is going to end up being extremely important for what's happening in Africa and Asia. Producing existing products that are existing in other places, but now producing them in new places. Or taking a product that already exists and beginning to sell it to new consumers. Okay, or using technologies that are already old in other places, but are brand new and very innovative in the places that they're being introduced to. So innovation is not always something that is a brand new in all places at once. And so I emphasize that innovation is relative to the recent normal in the area. And this is a little bit for me, and I know it's almost antisocial within this seminar because of the introduction about we're looking for new things. But I find that in the donor community and the governments, NGOs, etc., everybody's trying to think what's the jazzy new thing and sparkly thing, and then define that as what we really think of innovation. that boring old things like, just doing packaging or whatever is not an innovation. When in fact, the major innovations, I'd say 95% of the real innovations that are occurring and occurring quickly are things that are already existing in other places but are being adopted and adapted to turbocharge change within a local setting. So the local innovation is very new and innovative in that local place. So an existing product or technology or service becomes an innovation in new places. Now, this doesn't mean that I don't think that digitalization is an interesting subject. I've written a bunch of papers on it recently, but I think of it as a second generation, sort of icing on the cake, not a very important topic at present, even for getting innovation going in SMEs in developing countries, but it could be eventually, and in certain situations it already is. But I want that's sort of one of the antisocial sort of messages of my talk here. And there's many examples of this rapid local innovation. The one that I love that fascinates me mainly because over and over in Delhi, in the ministries, among researchers, in the conventional wisdom, everybody told us in our research. I was working with IFPRI, and now I'm working with IFPRI again, MSU and IFPRI, that there's a big crisis of cold storages in India. There simply aren't any cold storages. It's really sad, and it's missing. So we go out to Agra, which is feeding Delhi, and Agra is one of the biggest potato markets and production areas in the world. And we say, are there really no cold storages here? Because we can get potatoes all year in Delhi. And so what we found is that the conventional wisdom was just dead wrong. Really, in 1999, and often conventional wisdom is formed extrapolating from the past. So in 1999, the conventional wisdom was right. 1% of the farmers in this vast potato producing area used cold storages, these modern refrigerated ones. 10 years later, 99% of the farmers used the cold storages. Okay, and this was driven by this massive confluence of factors that made things change quickly. It was pulled by the massive growth of Delhi market. I'm fond of saying that Delhi plus environs is equal to the population of France. So imagine quickly increasing the income and the connectability of France to a bunch of potato farmers nearby, and you're going to get a change. It was linked by highway development that was done during the time. It was fueled by electrification. It was fed by farmers shifting very rapidly from wheat, especially, and rice in some of the areas, to potatoes of a much higher value. And it was helped by the National Agricultural Research Service, which was breeding storable potatoes that were also disease resistant, so ready to go for the cold storage revolution. And it was watered by the adoption, massive adoption of cheap irrigation pumps. So what happened was an avalanche of investments only by local SMEs. So there's no PepsiCo story. A lot of people in the international community, they love to say, in came PepsiCo, in came this, in came that, and started the change. No, this was local people that were doing this massive investment, shifting into cold storages. Another example is aquaculture in Bangladesh. Aquaculture grew 15-fold in 25 years. Okay, and the feed sector that in just the 5 years before our survey in 2014 had tripled in size. And there had been a big shift over a couple of years from traditional variety to much faster growing varieties or breeds of fish, tilapia and catfish. And fascinatingly, there had been a tripling of the midstream SMEs just in the decade before our survey. Okay, and you can see that this was involved wholesalers, hatcheries, a lot of vehicle makers, feed mills, just blasting off. A third example is in Tanzania. You say, well, packaged, it's boring to talk about innovation being just packaging and branding, but this is a major part of market change all around the world. It happened really newly in China in the 2000s in the rice sector in our study. In the 2010s in Tanzania, you had a big shift from just selling maize unpackaged in bulk and as a scoop to selling it in packaged, branded, and milled maize by SMEs. Again, This was a revolution by the SMEs. And you see that there's a boom in these SMEs with labeling and packaging and branding. The last example, or the next to last example, is this unbelievable, beautiful example of TEF in Ethiopia, where there was a huge investment by SMEs in transport, and you shifted in about 10 years from walking or horse delivery of the TEF to vehicle delivery, to truck delivery, something that took 100 years in the US. You had a massive jump in urban wholesale, milling, and prepared sales of Angetta and milled teff. You had the formation of these spontaneous clusters. And even during all of this, you actually had a reduction of transport costs in mill and wholesale margins. The performance improved in the market through the investments of the SMEs. Here's the teff. And finally, that example is in Nigeria, where people were lamenting imports of chicken, which really we found only form about 10 or 15% of total consumption of chicken. You've had this massive boom of this complex of maize, feed, and chicken and eggs, with a huge growth in chicken farming at the SME scale, with an intense involvement of women, marketing to the growing towns, a jump again, same as in Bangladesh, of a 600% increase in the feed sector. And you have thousands of SME traders of maize that are moving along a north-south corridor with the products. And in another work, we show that about 4% of them own trucks. 75% of what they're moving is through third-party logistics. Again, was off the radar to the error of the Nigerian government during the COVID crisis, when they declared it non-essential or gave it problems, when in fact it was the lifeline of the food supply chains. So you have this tremendous growth in the poultry sector. And very interesting for us here is that the common characteristics of all these cases and many others that we've identified is that these are not driven by the export market. They're driven by the domestic market. The exports form only 4 to 5% of all output of developing countries. 95% is going to the domestic market, and often it's thought of as the sleepy, stagnant, traditional situation. But in fact, even just for the domestic market, you have this tremendous change. Very important. There was no government management in any of these cases. No program, no direct help. There's a little bit of a subsidy, and we identified it being as 3% of the people, for example, the cold storage got subsidies. Nobody else did. Okay. And then also, while there's an obsession in many discussions about agro-parks in India or special economic zones and the beauty of managed clusters, let's get these people going. Well, in fact, what we observe and we hypothesize is that maybe 90% of the clusters are really these spontaneous clusters that are not formed by anybody, but start to be put together by the economic logic of the situation. And very important, no NGO help in any of these. No special credit facility, no bank help. In fact, over and over in all of these situations, we constantly interview people. They say, we don't have any problem with money. Getting money is not the problem. We either have retained earnings from our non-farm employment, or we can easily get it from retained earnings from the start of the business or from our brother. We don't need any special credit. What we need is better roads, better wholesale, better situation, less bribes. But we also saw that the government played a huge role in all these successes, not directly, but indirectly by enabling conditions, roads, electricity, crop varieties, wholesale markets. These are the things I think that are the absolute center to inducing innovation in SMEs in developing countries. Focus on these fundamental, these bones and blood of the system, and that's where you're going to get the action. So my conclusions are, there's a quiet revolution already going. The hidden middle is not the missing middle. There's already many cases of dynamic, spontaneous clusters undertaking local innovations. And the basic technologies are the ones that are driving this change. My recommendation is, don't reinvent the wheel and try to start new things or assume that they're not there. Look around, identify where these boomlets are taking off and starting, and then leverage those and facilitate those with infrastructure, identify what are missing technologies within the purview of what the people are doing in that particular place. And first and foremost, focus on spreading existing basic innovations into product, places, and supplier types such as women. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Tom. And as usual, we got what we expected. You're challenging the orthodoxy and making us again look at the segment which has been neglected. And you're also asking us to look at the innovation in a very different perspective. And personally, I have looked at a number of these innovations. I've tried to scale them in some of the programs we have done by creating more enablers. But I think we need to do more work on really highlighting these examples more to the policymakers so that they don't neglect that there. So I think point well taken. And sort of providentially, I'm in Ethiopia right now, and I'm looking at all those clusters, and I'm talking tomorrow at a big roadmap for future in which we are discussing TEF, and we're also discussing the floriculture, which is also a spontaneous cluster which has come out of Ethiopia on floriculture, which has become a very big thing. Ethiopia and floriculture and roses were not thought synonymous, but it is completely this middle SMEs who have innovated quite significantly there. So thanks a lot for kicking us off. And please put questions to Tom. There are some questions which are coming in the chat. Please look at them, Tom. We'll come to them. If you want to respond to them in the chat, please feel free to do that. And our next speaker right now is, I'm coming to the next speaker now. It is Henrik, no, not Henrik. I think Henrik is the third. I will go to Hakim Jimo. He is a vegan entrepreneur and co-founder of Veggie Victory, and also Nigeria's pioneer plant-based food company. And he has co-founded Veggie Victory in 2013. It initially started as a vegan restaurant, but now he has also introduced veg chunks, the first commercially produced meat substitute in Nigeria, available now in many stores nationwide. So today it's a full-fledged vegan company offering 100% plant-based high-protein products with Africa at heart. Over to you, Hakim.
Yeah, hello. Thank you for inviting me. Great being here. And thanks also to Tom, very important context. And just now he was talking about the infrastructure. Yes, we had just now a power cut, so I had to reconnect to another network. So we are right in the topic. So I think my role here today is giving a kind of case study of what Tom was talking about, like SME. So I'm calling in from Lagos, Nigeria. Actually, one of those places where, and I think we can start with the presentation. Should I share it from here, or I thought you shared from your end?
We can share, Hakim, so that we don't have any issues. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe that's easier, huh? Let me see if you... Can you see something?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, let me just go on and then we'll see how it works. So, yeah, I'm one of the two co-founders of Veggie Victory, and Veggie Victory is Nigeria's first plant-based food tech company. And the way everything started is 9 years ago as a vegan restaurant. And it's actually what I hope is this jazzy, sparkly boomlet to bring something that we can already see a trend elsewhere here to Nigeria. It's pretty much a mission driven. I have a vegetarian vegan background for 25 years, and I saw that a city of 20 million people, Lagos, doesn't have a vegan or vegetarian restaurant. I said that cannot be possible. So we started that vegan restaurant, and very soon we had to decide how are we going to scale with more restaurants, or what about a product? Because there are also no meat substitute products. And yes, everything plays in this African context of, and Tom was saying it, with a huge population growth, we are going to double our population in the next 2 decades, from on the continent 1.2 billion people to 2.5 billion. Nigeria alone from 200 to 400 million people. So that's a major shift in consumption. And also what kind of products, what kind of food are we going to consume? So that's where I am now talking a little bit a different message. So yes, there's need for normal SMEs like packaging, staple food like maize, but Veggie Victory, of course, we have a special mission. And that one is, what are we going to give to people? How are we going to feed globally 8 billion people, 10 billion people, and here in Africa? So I just pulled up this from the Eat Lancet report. So that's not my own thing, but it's the idea of what is a healthy planetary diet. So what works for the planet as well as for people. And you can just roughly see that half of this plate you see on the right side should be fruits and vegetables. And then from the other half, it should be 50% whole grains, plant proteins. And that's where we come in now. Veggie Victory is a plant-based company. So we want to reduce animal protein, or in the African context, it's more like preventing it. You see this next slide from the Eat Lancet report is, so what is our current, how does our current consumption look like? So the important one here is the beef that is way over the limits of a planetary health diet, and also for individuals, it's way too much animal protein. So in the African context, it's maybe I should say something like, we don't really, in total numbers, eat a lot of meat in Africa. It's actually the continent with the lowest meat consumption. For example, chicken, an American standard diet is uses 120 kilograms of chicken per year, and in Africa it's barely 6 kilograms. So it's like a fraction of meat consumption globally. However, that is going to change just by the sheer numbers of population I mentioned. So the meat consumption is growing by 300% in the next few decades. And actually, sub-Saharan Africa is projected to have the strongest growth rate in red meat. Now, that causes some problems and has already. So Africa's meat market is already overwhelmed. The prices of meat are multiplying. Food shortage is already here. And 50% of the meat that's for Nigeria is already imported. And then we have problems with Forex, of course, health. We are not immune for that. We have very high numbers of non-communicable diseases, that is diabetes, blood pressure, cancer even. And it's also already showing problems in environmental problems. So the use of, in livestock, antibiotics, hormones. In Nigeria in particular, we see land resource conflicts between herdsmen and farmers, and the desertification. Now, I don't know if this video plays, but I can try it. And you tell me if it doesn't play, otherwise I'll just move on. Can you hear something? Hello, anybody there?
We can see it, but we can't hear it.
Okay, yeah, then that should have been played from your side, but it's not a problem. Let me move on with the presentation. So this is basically a feedback of one of our business partners. It's a restaurant, and they have started using our product, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about it. It's an innovative meat substitute product. And it just gives you the feedback people have. It's a very innovative idea. And people are in Nigeria and mostly in Africa are not used to meat substitutes. So the discussion is pretty much different than in other parts of the world. So that's actually what we are doing. We develop high protein, quality plant-based alternatives that work the way we cook and eat meat in Africa. So again, I'm a vegan entrepreneur. I'm not an academic. So I have a product to sell, and I believe that the market is going to change, has to change. We need to have protein on the continent. We have a very high deficiency in protein. So the question is, where is the protein coming from? Are we going to have more livestock? And we believe that will cause more problems. And it's definitely going to be a mix of different kinds of proteins. So I'm not a militant vegan that says there has to be only plant-based alternatives. But to stay within the planetary health boundaries, we need to increase plant-based proteins and reduce or prevent animal proteins. So we have developed this product, Wheat Chunks. It's very important that it is high in protein and price parity, because many countries of the global south are low purchasing power markets. So we have to take that into account, and it won't work with meat substitutes from abroad that have to be imported and then are very high priced and out of reach for most customers. So in what context does that play? So you see, this is a map of animal product alternatives. So where are they mainstream? That is the yellow regions here, and Africa, South America is emerging. So there is it's a pioneer market, and we believe we have a lot of potential here to grow plant-based proteins. I know, and that's what I'm facing as an entrepreneur every day with consumers and investors, is Africa plant-based ready? And I mentioned it, we haven't started eating meat to the extent of other regions in the world. So it's a thing of, are we going to follow the same path, increasing our animal protein, or can we probably leapfrog some stages? So instead of going into meat, we go for plant-based meat. And we have some trends from, for example, the Veganuary in the UK, and Nigerians signed up. It was in the top 20. And also a report from Euromonitor that vegetarianism is booming. And it's mostly health driven, as people really consider health a big issue here. So, well, just a slide of who's behind it. So here, the first two, those are the founders. And interestingly, we have investors only from developed countries. So that's maybe a bit different message than Tom was saying, that it's not money. I think SMEs definitely need financial support. Whenever I meet fellow colleagues here in Nigeria, money is a big problem. We can't get loans from the banks with 20% interest rates, can't even get it. Venture capital is in very rudimentary stages, and then it goes into fintech companies. While I agree, food is the big business here. So we got only investors from the US, from Europe, and now it's also the Asian experience that we have a lot to learn from there. I wanted to say a little bit more about, or I wish I could say more about digital agriculture, but in our case, there's not much we can say about that. We are not growing crops, we are processing food, so we are an SME that processes food. So we don't really work with data like that. I think I'm pretty much through. Challenges, yeah. Infrastructure is definitely right, especially in Nigeria. Electricity, roads, to even get things shipped. We also certainly see the trends that the local market will be served by domestic products. The importation is more and more difficult, with the supply chain getting more difficult, and forex issues. So it is a future market, but very difficult to conquer. I hope I gave a good idea about what we do here at Veggie Victory in Nigeria. And then we have a question and answer.
Thanks, Hakeem.
So thank you very much
for making us go through the journey of Veggie Victory, and what are the foundational kind of data which you have used to look at the whole sector there. But you should be very heartened that the biggest growth sector in the food tech startup in China is the plant protein. If China is now becoming a very major country in this, then I think I see this trend growing a little bit faster. And I think that's something one has to look at. A lot of major e-commerce companies are making large investments in plant protein in China. Large countries, this is happening on a large scale. So you brought in an interesting aspect of when you come out with a new product category and a new segment, in a country which is used to doing that, how do you introduce that, and what kinds of issues you face. This is an important area also for our sister institution, IFC, which unfortunately there were people who could have joined but couldn't join because of some other things, but they are very keen to follow this. And maybe some of them will approach you at some stage to look at the investment opportunities as well there. So thanks a lot. And so we move now to our third panelist. We're running a little bit behind time, but I want to give you all the time which is required in this case, because they are very interesting innovations. So I want to introduce Henrik Stam Christensen, founder of Blend Hub, portable power blending, and Genometric Brain. I think he has spent his professional career in the agri-food sector. He's a serial food tech entrepreneur. He's disrupting this broken food value chain and using a very interesting concept, a global network of multi-localized food as a service hubs. You must have heard about software as a service. And now he is bringing that concept, food as a service hub, with the purpose of feeding all people, focusing on developing these hubs closer to ingredient suppliers and closer to final consumers. In that sense, it's like Tom, what he was describing, mostly for local markets, innovation can develop there, and you can create more job opportunities for local entrepreneurs in the process there. And but he's also bringing food safety, food security using very novel software solutions, which are able to lead to digitally verifiable trust in transparent supply chains across many of the countries. He is recognized as a promising circular economy initiative, and also highlighted by World Economic Forum as leading example of sustainable social impact. Henrik, over to you.
Thank you very much, Parmesh. Thanks to Hakeem, thanks to Tom as well. Thanks for having me. I will just try to see if I can share my screen and actually run the screen myself. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see it.
I will just go 1 second to see if I can put it on the whole, so you can see the whole screen now, right? You can
Yes,
see
we can.
Does it work? Can you see the whole screen now?
Yes, we can see the whole screen.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, but I first of all just want to make a small comment before in relation to what Tom said. 80% of the world's food production is actually done by 500 million small, medium enterprises and farmers around the globe. And the most scary thing is that they only take 20% of the value. 20% of the world's food during the Industrial Revolution over the last 100 years is done by the big food brands, big food companies, but they take 80% of the value globally. So when I started out, let's say, actually ideating a network of localized food production, I started out more than 20 years ago, and my founding principle was actually to invest in a sustainable food industry, or what I call kill the black
Sorry to
box.
interrupt you. Can you move to the full screen? It's again not showing the full screen.
Yes, I will. Is it better like
Yes,
this?
you're right now.
So the thing for me was clearly to empower small, medium enterprises to behave, to act, and to construct value like the big multinationals. So, of course, I knew it was going to be a long road. So, the first thing that was very important for me was actually moving towards more and more transparency in global supply chains, because consumers want to know what we eat. So I don't want to go into many details, but I founded 5 food tech companies, and we will see a little bit more about that. We have actually, over the last 20 years, created a sustainable business model. We have turned around more than 500 million euros in recurrent revenues, and we are completely self-financed because, as we also heard from Hakim, there are a lot of problems in the financial, let's say, even institution, not only in Africa, but also in the rest of the world. And when you start opening for capital markets, especially venture capital, first of all, their needs for return is very high. And of course, as we all know, when you do an innovative approach to a sustainable global supply chain and empowering SMEs around the globe, it's not immediately returned. So we wanted to do it well. We wanted to create a global, let's say, what we call a toolbox that everyone could be using. And I want to start just with this small video. So actually, before we go into bits and pieces, you will actually understand how we are empowering people and companies around the world. In this case, we have, over these last 10 years, we have actually been deploying 7 production hubs on 4 different continents. And then you ask yourself, and why did you do and how did you do that? Of course, we have learned a lot from, for example, a company like Coca-Cola, how localized bottling companies around the world can make a food product arrive to the last, let's say, end, basically, where nothing else is arriving. So we actually took a different approach and say, if we localize food production, where we have set up 2 in India, 1 in Thailand, 1 in Colombia, 1 in Mexico, and 2 in Spain, and this is what you see actually here, and we actually bring high tech with us to the localization. We actually employ local people who have an understanding of the local conditions in the part of the world. In this case, in India, we are creating nutritional recipes based on ragi that is initially always have been valued as a poor man's food. But what we are doing is that we empower local entrepreneurs, as the woman you saw in the beginning, actually to create branded food products around locally available, majority-wise ingredients like ragi. And then we tune them up like any other, let's say, developed country in the world, being the US or Europe, where we actually make very nutritional, high-quality food products, even to underserved communities, with complete transparency and traceability. And by empowering local entrepreneurs, we empower them to put the brand on, we empower them to apply their own sales and marketing strategy, and we empower them also to decide which kind of distribution, as the one you have seen here, actually arriving all the way to the slums in Bangalore. And by creating a transparent global supply chain, we are not only capable of course, creating a business model that is empowering the local entrepreneurs to increase the value of their local supply chain, but we are also actually attracting a lot of donation money around the globe that are having specific focuses on some of these consumer groups where we can actually personalize nutrition. So we actually target specific consumer groups in specific parts of the world, using the local ingredients, using and adapting to local recipes and so on. So I will jump to the next one and just make a small summarize that we are building a global platform based on empowering local business ecosystems. turning farmers into the new CPG producers, and supply consumers directly with healthy and affordable food in transparent supply chains. And this is what we call food as a service. Now, food as a service in a simplified manner basically means any recipe with any ingredient anywhere in the world. So what I'm trying to show you here is that we actually go, when we go to India or we go to Southeast Asia, Latin America, or Africa, hopefully very soon, what we do is that we do not only look at the ingredients and the recipes, we actually look at what are the consumers capable of paying. So because we live in data times, many times we have not been capable of understanding what kind of pricings were available or what kind of consumers were capable of paying a certain price for a nutritional, healthy, and affordable food product. So we have set up a team of data scientists who are looking around to pricings around the world. So when we create recipes and ingredients, we actually do it bottom up. We go to the final price and say, every serving of a meal of 100 grams of this and that recipe containing these and these ingredients, a consumer in India could pay 50 cents for a meal. So we calculate back and we optimize the entire global supply chain. So it's actually not only serving the purpose from a product quality perspective, but also from a price perspective anywhere in the world. What you said yourself, Parmesh, is that it's no longer enough just to say that we are good. And the beauty around the times we live in today is, as you said yourself, when you create a software and when you create a strategy around transparency, you also have a lot of science and technology available. So back in 2008-9, when we were about to deploy our first hub far away from our factory in Spain, what we did is we looked around and say, how can we actually digitize food quality? Because many times when we get a batch of a food product, in the case of ours, we are using mainly powders. So we buy food powders like coffee, cocoa, salt, sugar, flours, proteins. Hakeem talked about plant-based. Most of the plant-based is protein-based in a certain point of the let's say, processing. So food powders are 40% of what actually is the world's food consumption. And anything that is fresh can be powdered. Historically, we removed the water, we created a dry product, we milled it, we powdered it just like flour, and then we turned it into a bread again. So think about today, we can actually individualize the breads by putting the right powders into that recipe. But how do we ensure that consumers are actually aware and actually agree and know what is inside that bread is the thing that they're actually paying for? So we invented, based on near-infrared spectroscopy, that has always, as you can see in the center, this blue machine, were very expensive machines, around 100,000 euros. But over the last years, in technology, there are coming more and more machines in, hardware as we call it. So we actually decided, instead of just using one machine or the other, just like the iPhone or the Samsung or the Huawei, we actually decided to create a software that could be serving any machine. So what we did is that we digitized a lot of our food powders that cannot be distinguished because they have the same color and so on. And actually today we have digitized more than 200,000 different food powder products. And today we are empowering partners around the world to digitize the powders that are available and get into factories around in the 4 continents we're operating today, thereby meaning that every single sample and batch of product that go into one of our hubs, plus the final product that are leaving our hubs, has been completely digitized based on a library of what we call good food product samples. So how does it actually look like when we localize a hub? Because today we can actually localize a food production hub anywhere in the world to support local community in less than 6 months. So this is what we call Smart Food Platform. So it's a local based network of innovation transformation and production hub under this food as a service model. We do never, and we have never pretended to be alone. We are a platform, we're a collaborative platform. So what you see in this photo here is that we are connecting to local farmers, local raw materials. We are creating a relationship with universities, with tech centers, and what we deploy is what we call the center of the operation. So when we integrate Blend Hub in this global replication model, we actually integrate, as you can see in the center of this picture, with our portable powder blending, packaging, and quality control factory in a container. But we link upstream, for example, in this case, with cassava farmers around in Africa. We link with the processors of the cassava that are actually drying it, milling it into a powder. We help them to actually build gluten-free cassava flour, pure, or put into recipes that could be a cassava enriched nutritional bread with the right micronutrients, that vitamins and minerals that are needed in that paste. And we actually take it all the way to the retail chains with the customer, with the entrepreneur brand, distribution strategy, and sales and marketing. And one of the things that is the most beautiful thing is that when you have done this for 15, 20 years, you actually today are able to measure results. So around in our hubs, we are now helping companies from idea to launch, localized anywhere in the world, what we say in less than 90 days. We are launching what we call food campaign launches. So for example, if you or Hakim are launching a new product, you are actually capable with us not only launching it in Nigeria, you can actually also launch it in other parts of Africa. You could eventually launch it in the rest of the world. And here you can see, by launching a food as a service campaign, meaning that we identify the ingredients, the prices of the ingredients, the distance from the ingredient supplier to our factory, where do we localize, what is the cost of logistic warehouses, and what is actually the recipe all the way down to the industry, to the retail or the final consumer. Just to say, over the last 3 months, we are creating, by launching these campaigns, more than 1 million in immediate opportunities. And of course, we are creating revenue creation based on leads, opportunities, and of course, the one opportunities. This is again where we empower the whole community, that anyone can actually launch their own brand, their own food product anywhere in the world. And this is the last slide where we invite anyone. And of course, to be with the World Bank today is an enormous pleasure, because the truth is, we both supply B2B. We supply B2B, as I said, in some parts of the world, but our aspiration is already now looking for the next 50 locations. So what we do is that when we look for locations, for example, like Nigeria, we actually want to localize with local business people who believe what we believe. So we invite any of you on this call, or any of one of the people in your communities in the rest of the world, actually to help this global platform model to accelerate faster, because this acceleration of a multi-localized global network of localized food production hub will build an enormous amount of empowerment to local communities, both for being successful locally, as well as regionally, as well as globally. So I just want to thank you again. For me, this is my first time with the World Bank, and we have already demonstrated that we are capable in a for-profit model built on transparency to create value even for the most underserved communities on the globe today, as if they were a sports nutrition manufacturer in the US or in Europe. So thank you very much to all of you, and I'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions.
Thanks a lot, Henrik, and it's good to present this new value proposition, which I think is a new way of looking at production, distribution, localizing, globalizing. How do you really just use these kind of new models of engaging on production and consumption? Plus also, I was at the World Food Program Innovation Accelerator in Munich just a week back. I think this would be something which would be also quite interesting if the food is not only distributed in a very kind of standard way, but it is produced in a quality way, nutritious way, and various kinds of foods are available for all the kinds of food distribution which happens all over the world. So good ideas, it's good to hear you in person. I've been looking at what you have been writing on LinkedIn and posting there, but it's good to see what you are talking about.
Armesh, I think the most important thing, just as a last comment, you mentioned World Food Program. We have so many initiatives around the world. I think the most important thing, and this is one of the, let's say, ideas are easy, but execution is difficult. And that is, again, what Hakeem said. We cannot, any of us can solve the world's biggest problems. Independently, that World Food Program was created in 1961. We still have 800 million people going hungry to bed. And we can simply not accept neither the 800 million going hungry to bed, and we cannot accept either more than 2 billion people actually suffering from malnutrition, everything from obesity to a lack of certain micronutrients. So we are, let's say, a platform model that are really embracing shared value creation, but we also know that there have to be a willingness not to compete with each other, but actually transparently create this shared value. So this is what we have been working on for the last 15 years, finding value-aligned people and companies who are willing to operate in this manner that is so important for creating a global impact.
So thanks a lot, Henrik. And I think there will be Q&A because people are still absorbing what you are saying. So I think so I would also request you that all the presenters can put their email ID or contact, because people are willing to talk to you later on. So it will be good if in the chat you can put your coordinates on how to get in touch with you there, particularly the entrepreneurs, both Hakeem as well as Henrik there. So there are a lot of people who would get in touch with you as they come in there. So I would now move over to Yvonne Pinto as our lead innovation specialist at the bank, but has worked with the number of innovators across Africa and many other parts of the world. So unfortunately, Yvonne, we have only 5 minutes now because I want to bring in the Q&A for the panelists in the next round, and we want to finish this in time. So Yvonne, over to you.
Thank you so much, Parmesh, and thank you and greetings to the panelists. There's some very interesting talks. I'm going to try and focus on a few themes that I think cut across the presentations and are very interesting. I do want to just highlight that the pandemic has obviously accelerated the situation of stable food security, but it's also created disruptions in eradicating malnutrition in the supply of nutritional interventions, which ties very closely in with what Henrik was talking about in his talk. So Thomas spoke very much about the increase in demand for food. He talked very much about the composition of that food changing from unprocessed to more processed foods, particularly poor and in the urban middle class, an increased dependency not on staple foods, but on high density nutritious foods, and most of this being handled by SMEs. I think the part that was very interesting in his presentation was really about this growing middle, the midstream SMEs and their role. And in fact, interestingly enough, if you look at the role of these SMEs in the agriculture sector, there are reports, UNIDO has produced a report, for example, that suggests that 40% of the jobs in Malawi and Tanzania are food and beverage associated out of total manufacturing employment. So actually the employment opportunities in the urban environment are really, really growing the opportunities for the contribution that agriculture makes to economic growth. I would also say that another theme that runs through these presentations, and is particularly pertinent for Hakeem's, is sustainability and the need for more regenerative practices in terms of food production. But interestingly, I want to draw us back to the comment that Thomas made about innovation. If we look at the private sector, there are very much three main horizons to that innovation: protecting continuous innovation of core products, extending those core products to new markets, customers, or targets. And the third is really through that approach, understanding where there are new capabilities, new business, new products, very disruptive. So actually, when we think about this missing middle, this emerging middle, there are opportunities that larger corporations face in terms of that innovation. So if they are looking for innovation, they're looking for startups who can build and deliver products for them. They're looking at opportunities where they can combine their strengths with the strengths of these new and innovative businesses by acquiring these external innovators. They're also trying to rapidly copy some of these disruptive innovations, but using their own incumbent business models to dominate markets. And the risk here is that by copying this innovation without understanding the customers clearly enough, can result in solutions that miss the targets. Finally, they are unable to innovate faster than the younger, smaller disruptors. And so it's very difficult for them to protect their legacy and indeed find opportunities to work with these new organizations. What I would also say is that the examples Thomas gives, cold chain in Delhi, unpackaged and packaged branded maize in Tanzania, teff in Ethiopia, these really show tremendous advances in food processing and value creation, which are beginning to dominate, particularly the African landscape. And that's a very exciting proposition, because not only does it create opportunities for non-farm employment, but it also helps to drive that economic growth, create opportunities for more transparent food, more transparency and safety in food rather. It also helps with the notion of personalized nutrition, which again is a theme that both Henrik and indeed Hakeem have talked about. So there is, from Thomas's talk, a huge identification of the role of government, and I think iterated also by the other two speakers around these implications for roads, electricity, improved crop varieties, wholesale markets, and indeed the coordination to cluster these food, I would say factories / light industrial pockets. And again, Henrik's model is very exciting in that regards. In relation to consumer choices, I think Hakeem really points out the notion of growing veganism. Again, that speaks to the consumer desires. It also speaks to sustainability. It's very interesting that for many food companies, 70% actually of their sustainability metrics are inherited in the production system. So they are beginning to backwardly integrate to try and find solutions that drive down their sustainability or drive up their sustainability metrics. I think in addition to infrastructure, roads, finance, etc., that government has a role in, there's also a role for private finance. I think, Hakeem, you made that point very clear. I think that's very pertinent in many parts of the world. And I think that there is a growing interest from those who are investing, be they private equity, venture capital, or larger organizations. I see a comment in the chat about IFC. Is really about driving opportunities for more localized ecosystem development in the food system, using accelerators like digital, enhancing traceability, safety, but also stability in the food production system, and ensuring that digital plays a role in reducing the costs for that. So combining opportunities for the role of these smaller SMEs, enabling them to disrupt the activities of larger corporations in bringing innovation, localizing that local ecosystem set of actors to combine high technology with local people's choices, tastes, local recipes, looking at pricing again, as Henrik mentioned, and strengthening those local supply chains. So we know, as a result of the pandemic, those were disrupted and fragmented. We know that's an ongoing story, and it's a global picture. these are some very, very great opportunities to start to address those from a local level, to build local food security, to harness opportunities for the 500 million smallholder farmers who produce a good proportion of the global food supply, to bring employment opportunities to them, and to ensure that we are meeting sort of minimal requirements on nutrition, looking at diversification for better regenerative efforts in our food system. And clearly there is a very important role, in fact, that the World Bank and other players can take up in guiding their client governments for that enabling environment, for opportunities to crowd in finance, for some of the infrastructure around a creation of hubs, for recognizing the value that these employment opportunities present as part of the urban and increasingly,
you have to conclude in 1 minute now.
The rural food supply. What I just want to say, the last point, Parmesh, is that I think the model that Henrik talks about provides a really interesting example to scale this innovation at a global level whilst meeting the requirements of national needs. And so I'll stop there, but I do want to congratulate the speakers and really appreciate the points that have been made. Thank you, Parmesh.
Thanks a lot, Yvonne, for reflecting on all the presentations and drawing implications. I would now like to bring in Chichi and Alvin to read out the key questions, as they have clustered questions. And after they read out, then I'll go for one response from each panelist, because we don't have time to go for 2 or 3 rounds. So I will ask them to put the key questions for each panelist, and then I will just facilitate a final response from each of them, reflections based on what has been asked by the audience in the chat, plus other reflections you have. Go ahead, Elvin and Chichi.
Thank you, Pamesh. So I'll just go through some of the questions that we got from our participants in the chat, and a few questions for Tom. So we have, to what extent are these SMEs in Africa and Asia, despite their innovativeness, destined to be crowded by the Walmarts of the world? And are they able to capture economies of scale, integrate vertically, and also exert market power? And another one for you, Tom, given the large demand for scaling up innovations, what more needs to be done from your perspective, especially by development banks like the World Bank, to scale up these in a significant way to make them sustainable and also with lasting impact? And a couple of questions for Hakim. So in the Middle East, and this is also true in many parts of the world, the price of plant-based alternatives are very high. So how are you dealing with this on your end to be affordable for all the population in Nigeria who are not vegans to at least try your products? Another one is, what specific methods are you finding to use easier? So for instance, others use specialized fermentation. So what has been easier in your business until now? And then a couple of questions for you, Henrik. How best can biofortified crops be promoted in Africa and Asia? And also, can you provide some comments about how we can use blockchain technology to help with food quality assurance in emerging markets? Thank you all for your amazing presentation. So those are the questions. Over to you, Pamesh.
Okay, so I'll add one more question, is that I think clearly Tom has a view that we have to really let these kind of innovations, which have not been mainstreamed yet, brought into the policy space, and then we need to do this on a much more kind of systematic way and bring it into the developmental discourse. Even if it's not investment, it's facilitation, and have more enablers in place. So what should be the role of the World Bank to do that? Similarly, in case of Hakim, also the plant proteins, we have a lot of livestock projects also going on, and we have a lot of plant protein projects also going on. So what do you see is the way by which we can develop a more enabling environment for more innovation and experimentation on plant-based proteins to happen so that more enterprises like yours can emerge. And Henrik, is clearly a question that the food hubs which you are doing, can they, part of it, become more like a systemic public-private investment in the programs which we do, particularly which focus on nutrition, food security, processing, and all that? What is the way you think? There's a knowledge and learning agenda, but how does this get converted into a mainstream investment agenda? So that's one question from my side to whatever Chichi has already said. So we will go to Tom first, then to Hakeem, and then Henrik, you have the final word. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Tom.
Thank you so much. This is a super exciting panel. I have a couple points. One, and I feel this duality throughout the whole discussion, and not now, but over the past 3 years with the Food System Summit and et cetera. And now there's a tension on two poles. On one side, I feel impatience, frustration, and excitement. So a lot of donors, a lot of governments, et cetera, see all this exciting things that are happening: digitalization, product differentiation, new chemistry of food, et cetera, and they say, we want that. Okay. And I worked with a big development bank last year, and I was bringing up my usual song and dance about the importance of the fundamentals, the blood and the bones of the food system, the wholesale markets, the roads, et cetera, and the logistics, the extreme importance of all the basics and investing in that, and that a lot of big success stories have been starting with this investment in basics. And there was a reaction against that I noted over and over again. People said, oh, I don't know. I mean, this is boring, talking about wholesale markets. What are you talking about? And roads, everybody talk. And really what we need is digitalization of the wholesale markets. And in my mind, I have this kind of dual personality. I'm, a creature of these, cocktail hour kind of conferences. Everything's exciting. These are all the possibilities. And then I'm tramping around in wholesale markets, constantly. And I'm thinking, I'm here with Suida Liverpool Tassier. We're in the Abuja fish wholesale market, and it's booming beyond belief in Abuja. Okay, unbelievable, hundreds of vans coming and sloshing around. And then I go to a World Bank conference. Okay, and in the conference, everybody's saying, unfortunately, there's a missing middle. The supply chains are dead, of the fish. And we need really something to jumpstart, to leapfrog. And it sounded, I said, boy, this is the same conversation I hear over and over. And I asked the people in the wholesale market, what do you need? They said, look at, you're knee deep in mud. This thing hasn't had any attention for 30 years. Everybody ignores us. We're slipping between the stools. And then I go to the conference and people say, nobody's doing anything. We need to start this thing up. We need to find solutions. And I thought, my God, this is insane. The fundamentals that you have right in front of you in fixing up the wholesale markets and the roads and the POC market, et cetera, is crying for you. So I feel like there's this excitement of leapfrogging and the sparkly things, and there's these crying to be met basic fundamental things that everywhere I see that they're being met, there's an incredible spontaneous reaction by the local people. And I feel like at least let's make the debate have the two sides to it, okay? To look at the fundamentals and also get some sparkly. The other side is the duality that you see in conferences. Here we have these brilliant entrepreneurs. I mean, I love the talks. And in conference after conference, you have basically the elite of the SMEs. Okay, you have the entrepreneurs that are well-spoken, are thinking ahead, are using new technologies, are tackling emerging niches. This is an extremely important class of people, okay, that need to be, they attract equity funds, they attract donors. These need to be supported. But I feel that the debate also needs to have equally important, because, we don't have a member of the cold storage cluster talking today, right? It's so we need to have the other side also, these spontaneous, these mainstream spontaneous clusters of the regular people that are doing stuff, and then have interactions between these brilliant heroes I just heard with their new technologies and thoughts, and say, let's stretch the mainstream guys with hearing from the new people and the niche and the emerging, technologies, but let's also attend very much to the mainstream. Third, the questions relate to big and small. You have you have the traditional, transitional, and modern. For most of South Asia and Latin America and Africa, we're in the transitional stage when SMEs are king. Okay, 80% of the food sector, just emerging the big guys. Latin America, East Asia, the modern is king. Okay, and so already the SMEs are scrambling, etc., to create niches, etc. So if we think about Africa and South Asia, the key thing is just that they're going to face a lot of high waters later. The Nestle's, the Bacresas, the Bimbos, the Walmarts are all smelling the blood, smelling the possibilities. They're going to buy up a lot of them. This is the normal thing we see in the rest of the world. We have 15, 20 years before that's a major, major theme in the Africa and South Asia. 5 billion, whatever it is, 4 billion people. So you're looking at a situation where the SMEs, if they have the blood and bones and have the fundamentals in place, can roar ahead, be competitive, and then begin doing all the normal positioning of themselves to deal with being eaten or being absorbed or even being upscaled and become themselves very large. And that's the final point, is how do you find the boomlets? I just thought about this term today. I've heard it before, but I never used it because I always say, I'll never forget in my life, in 2009 when I gave a talk, or 2010, Abhijit Sen and the Planning Commission of India was there, and we gave the talk about the cold storages. And I thought, because he's a brilliant guy and he's going to destroy me at the end of my talk about what we found, he stood up and he said, "You've changed our view of rural India today." I was, I had my only tears in my life during a talk, because I thought, wow, that's fascinating. Here's this super giant guy, planning commission is so important. And he said, the reason is, everybody said, the little guys and the normal economy of food economy of India is in the mud. Okay, we need some. It's all I hear is problems, or I hear the big guys, the PepsiCos and the WalMarts. They're at the table. They're saying we're the solution. Here you're saying that there's these tremendous revolutions going on under our nose, and we need to help them. And how do you find them? I say look at the market, the demand side first, which is what I did in my talk, and work backward. If you say, people say there's no cold storage of potatoes in the India market, the Delhi market is suffering from that. And I said, well, that's odd. I live in India for 4 years. I lived in Delhi. And basically, we have potatoes all the time. So they're wrong. So let's find out, where do these darn potatoes come from? And then we go back and we find that there's this tremendous cold storage revolution. You see packaged food everywhere in Tanzania. It's already a revolution. Where is it coming from? Who's doing this? Okay, and then we go backward. So I think work backward from the demand that you see, do scanning to find where, as Parmesh was saying in the beginning, you have the floriculture, you have the teff revolution, and you look in the places that people are not necessarily looking, but don't neglect these wonderful examples of new niche things, vegan restaurants in Africa. That's brilliant. Okay, well, you have that, but you also look for the scanning of the fundamentals. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Tom. So we will take you that we will do a separate event on the boomlets you have identified, and then let's get all those heroes in there basically, and give them, shine their lights basically there. So we'll take you on that offer, and you will have to help us facilitate that event basically there. So I think what's an important area you are pointing out, just to give you a fact of information, agriculture markets and on banana, mangoes, upgradation is still 60% of our investment in Africa. So that's not going away anywhere. Demand is from governors of province are all demanding those investments there. So in the sense, what I look at digitization and lots of other things as a way of increasing efficiency, effectiveness, and discovery of better quality products by the consumers to upgrade that. So infrastructure doesn't go away. It's not either or situation in that sense. Agro-logistics, infrastructure is still 60% of our total investment in Africa, and roads and all the things we talked about. That's not going away anywhere. But I think we have an advantage of having data available from these places, which will enable the market discovery and new products and services to be delivered and developed more efficiently than they have ever been, which I think is testament to what Henrik is describing on how this new kind of approach could work. Okay, so I would now go to Hakeem. Don't be overwhelmed by what Tom said. Please answer your questions, Hakeem. So we still feel that the innovations have to happen all the time. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, well, I speak for the SMEs here. There is a funding gap, definitely, you know, and this discrepancy of what is the World Bank, what is international institutions doing, what comes to this small entrepreneurs. It has been around for as long as I'm in this business, you know. It is not just an infrastructural thing, it is a funding issue. And I'm glad that Tom confirmed this data, that the middle it's a hidden middle. I know I have similar data, 70% of the food is traded on local markets. So it's not just in supermarkets. The whole food market is driven by SMEs, but the money is not going there. Veggie Victory is an exception. We got money because of this. Yeah, it's an unconventional idea. But if I would be trading in maize or packaging maize, there's no way I would get any money from an investor. So definitely there's a funding gap. I know it also. I've been talking to the British Development Bank, and they're looking into alternative proteins, but then they have ticket sizes of 10 million pounds or dollars, and that is not realistic for SMEs. So what is really important is that ticket sizes, even from as low as $5,000, $20,000, $50,000, are getting to this middle, this hidden middle. I understand the problem is always who's going to manage those processes, those grants, whatever, but there's no way around it. If you're just dealing with the Nestle's of this world, you will miss a big part of the market. A word to the prices of plant-based proteins. Well, companies abroad have different business models. I know they went more for premium. Definitely margins are higher. We couldn't do that because to get market share, you need to be price competitive. So obviously we don't have those R&D expenses, but I would say a big part is the high margins those companies are having. And already prices are coming down in other parts of the world. So it's also annoying for me that as a vegan, why is a burger, a plant-based burger, 3 times the amount than a beef burger? It's also a subsidy issue. In the Western world, I have some German background. Meat is subsidized. Africa, it's not. So that helps here with the price parity, but that's a bit of the background and the different prices.
Like
and then the techniques. Yeah, well, I can't say much to the techniques. I'm
having an interview with HR that I'm looking fresher than. I just don't get it.
Excuse me, can you please mute your mic? You're interfering with the discussion. Sorry, thank you. Go ahead, Hakeem.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's as much as I can say for development technology of meat substitutes. There are so many ways. They're hundreds of years old, and there's definitely also going to be affordable ones. It doesn't need to be some fancy products that we see in the Western world. So meat substitutes have a huge variety. I think I'm good, huh? Anything
Thanks
I
a
missed?
lot, Hakeem. So I think you
Thank you.
covered most of the issues, and I think our Nigeria program is designing a new investment on the food and agriculture. So they will be in touch with you, and they will seek some of the issues you described. We are working on an Africa Enabler Fund right now, jointly with IFC, exactly to look at these initial ideas, how to they get converted and scaled up. And we will be in touch with you on that as well at some stage. Last but not the least, Henrik, please, your reflections on questions which people are raising, as well as final thoughts on how we could collaborate.
Very short. Let's say, listening to Tom and the wholesale markets, I must tell you one thing, Tom, and everyone. Platform models are highly underestimated. There are a lot of things going on under the skin right now in platform collaborative models, where we are sharing a lot of things. I can tell you, Tom, we actually work with powder preparation for wholesale markets. We work with cold stores. We work with logistics centers, because once you localize, and I didn't give you the number by purpose before, you actually are capable of removing 20 to 50% of a specific recipe price if you position it in the right location. So in Africa, not necessarily you need big roads. Maybe you need a drone delivery company, or in Amsterdam, you need a clean energy company with whom we are working with that have been financed by the big German retail chain, Edeka, and so on and so forth. So platform models, please, I have copied on the comments. Follow Sanjit Chowdhury. That is, for me, one of the absolute masters of platform economy. And platform economy is no longer based on winner takes it all. It's about sharing economy, and it's about actually utilizing information and understanding on how to create that shared value. And the beauty is, when you start, Hakeem, to look at where every single cent is going. When we distributed our first hub in India, we removed a recipe that we were producing in Spain based on guar gum coming from the Indian, let's say, Gujarat region. We took it all the way to Spain. We blended it with other European ingredients, and we sent it back to the Middle East. In the same moment, we put on operation in India. We removed warehousing, capital expenditures in warehousing, logistic, transport time, and so on and so forth. Immediately, we removed 30% of the cost of that specific food product just by utilizing the superpower of localization. I know there was a couple of questions about fortified crops. Actually, when you look at the last cent, there are many things that technology companies are promoting. Of course, when you reinvent technology, the first kilo of food is very expensive, just like when you make a software program. But the thing is that once you are getting that towards slowly consumers that are starting buying it, prices go down. So actually, let's say what we are looking at, and one of the questions was about bio-fortified crops. We actually believe that you don't need to process white rice more to bio-fortified white rice. You can actually have a small sachet that you put into the cooking water or whatever you're doing with the rice, and you can actually fortify it in your own house at a price that is a fraction of the cost of complicating things in the agriculture. The last thing I wanted just to, by the way, blockchain is an amazing technology, but blockchain is only ensuring, let's say, transactions. But what we are talking about when we talk about digitized food quality, of course, we can, every single digitization, we can upload that to a blockchain, but we are actually using technologies that in itself are so powerful that it basically do not need blockchain, except of course to avoid any alteration of the transfer and of the information. The last thing, Parmes, public-private collaboration. We are today working with localization anywhere from a food producer, an ingredient producer, a specific Abuja in Nigeria. But of course, a lot of these government and especially private, public-private collaborations are absolutely fundamental because, as I say, if we work on a platform model where we create shared value and we actually do it transparently, remember that the CEO of World Food Program, not too far away, challenged Elon Musk online and told Elon to give him 6 billion to eradicate hunger. We do not believe that 6 billion or any number in billions can eradicate hunger. We believe that public-private collaboration in a transparent global supply chain can eradicate global hunger and global malnutrition. So this is why we are very, very long in our approach to platform collaboration and private-public collaboration in different areas around the world, where of course the laws are different, the ways that private-public are working together are different, and so on. So it's very much about individualization, personalization of a platform model anywhere in the world.
Thanks a lot, Henrik. I think you shared a new concept on platform economy and these innovation hubs where distribution can happen and production can happen anywhere. And nutrition requires very out-of-box thinking. So a lot of current models are not adequate for nutrition. So I think there's a very food for thought there. And I think it's exciting to have Tom really kick us off with his his unconventional thinking, which we have neglected for a long time. I think that needs to be highlighted and really bought into the policy space. As Hakeem bringing absolutely a new segment of products which are coming up, which I think in terms of health and all will become a very important part. And how do we become more conscious in terms of well-being and a healthy planet to introduce those kinds of products? And Henrik, I think, the whole concept of platform economy, which has been used by the information technology guys for a long time, basically software as a service. Now, how do you bring that concept of food as a service and create platform solutions? Very, very interesting ideas. And we look forward to, collaborating with you in future, both on, the knowledge learning agenda, but also the operationalizing agenda. And thanks to all of you who have stayed back. I think our mortality rate has been only 30%. We started with 100, 70 people are still staying, which is one indication of what is happening in that webinar. So look forward to the next in the series. I want to thank Chichi and Alvin for hosting that, and thank again Tom, Hakeem, and Henrik and Yuan for your exciting contributions. Bye bye everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Bye bye.
Bye.